one day I was in a great deal of depression and I started writing down the words that people have recently told me that lifted me up on my whiteboard that I had at the time. And as time went on, I was able to add to it and add to it and add to it and add to it. And these were all the amazing things that people had called me and told me that I was in that period of time. And it really helped bring me out of that depression. Hey, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. It is me, Angey Lee. Welcome if you're new here. I want to get into a conversation about complex post-traumatic stress disorder. I have a lot of people saying that I have personality disorders and that I'm crazy and all this stuff, and I've said 1,000 times that therapists, psychologists, and psychiatrists have told me 1 billion times that I'm not crazy. So I thought maybe if I enlighten you a little bit on complex post-traumatic stress disorder and what it is, it might give a little bit of understanding. So yeah, that's what this video is about. CPTSD, complex post-traumatic stress disorder, forms in response to repeated interpersonal violence that leaves the victim feeling trapped with no hope of escape or of imminent death. CPTSD is a developmental trauma disorder. The trauma model states that children who experience chronic sexual, psychological, physical abuse and neglect develop CPTSD. However, it also forms in kids who suffer slavery, human trafficking, working in sweatshops, war, or survivors of concentration camp environments and cults. The trauma which causes this disorder may also include having experienced betrayal, defeat, and shame. The reason children are vulnerable to forming CPTSD is that children do not have the cognitive or emotional skills to understand what is happening to them. The psychological implications are enormous, leaving the child with a complex mess of their core beliefs about who they are and what they are. This tangled mess becomes even more complicated by flashbacks, nightmares, and other systems that are worse in adulthood. Often children experiencing interpersonal traumatic events experience a conundrum in their minds, and some choose to disassociate the events away. Complex PTSD is different from PTSD in two crucial ways. The trauma is longer lasting or repeated, and the symptoms are more severe. The symptoms of CPTSD can be life-altering and can cause severe disabilities such as many different forms of mental health disorders, including borderline personality disorder, dissociative disorders, that's what I have, dissociative disorders, and somatization disorder. The emotional damage that precludes CPTSD can lead to prolonged feelings of terror, worthlessness, helplessness, and warping of the identity and sense of self in children. When these children become adults, they have wide-ranging symptoms with not having a solidified understanding of self and problems regulating their own emotions. However, while the emotional state of young children facing overwhelming life experiences is terrible enough, the repeatedly being in a position of being in danger continually changes their brains as well. Other parts of the body are affected, as well as the body's inflammatory response to the ongoing influx of stress hormones, harming the child's systems. Illnesses in adulthood are directly attributable to trauma in childhood, such as problems with immune system disorders, diabetes, and heart diseases. The symptoms of complex post-traumatic stress disorder may include losing memories of the trauma or reliving them. And of course, when you try so hard to lose memories of bad things, you lose the good ones too. Difficulty regulating emotions that often manifest as rage. Depression. Suicidal thoughts or actions. Sudden mood swings. Feeling detached from oneself. Feeling different from others. Feeling ashamed. Feeling guilty. Difficulty maintaining relationships. Difficulty trusting others. Seeking out or becoming a rescuer. Feeling afraid for no obvious reasons. Having a feeling of always on the alert. Becoming obsessed with revenge on the perpetrator. Feeling a loss of spiritual attachment and either ignoring or depending upon religion for self-worth. So, what does complex post-traumatic stress disorder look like? We have problems with emotional regulation. Survivors find they have a very difficult time experiencing, expressing, and controlling emotions. Not only are survivors unable to describe, comprehend, and label them correctly, feeling emotions is terrifying and might express in a volatile manner. Survivors may experience persistent sadness, suicidality, or either explosive anger or be incapable of expressing it. Survivors often feel numb and are incapable of leveling out their moods after they have experienced an extreme emotion such as elation or grief. One common symptom any survivor encounters is the re-experiencing of their childhood trauma through flashbacks. These flashbacks are intrusive and often the triggers causing them are elusive. The symptom is known as an emotional flashback. Difficulty with relationships. Survivors often have feelings of isolation and haven't the knowledge of how to form relationships. The fear involved in trusting another human being will not harm them leaves these survivors harboring the intense need to hide away and refuse to try to trust others, while also desperately wanting someone to love them. However, some survivors swing the opposite direction and trust too much, leaving them vulnerable to victimization to people who repeat the pain and abandonment of the past. That would be my cousin. Difficulty with self-perception. Due to the messages given by their childhood abusers, survivors often have problems with perceiving themselves as worthwhile and worthy of dignity and respect. Unfortunately, due to the signals sent by caregivers, many believe they are fundamentally bad or damaged beyond repair. This leaves survivors feeling powerless, hopeless, and helpless. Many survivors take on the role of rescuers, sacrificing their own health and happiness to care for others, while others feel a sense of entitlement that blocks their healing. There is also a permeating feeling of not belonging in the world, that somehow they're a mistake and should never have been born. This brings a deep sense of loneliness that may result in isolating from other people. Attachment to the perpetrator. Because survivors have such a low self-esteem of themselves, many find themselves believing that they are making up things about those who harmed them, or worse, that they deserved it. Many cannot break free from the influence of their abusers, especially if that person is someone they loved, like a mother, father, or older sibling. even though they know the behavior they received as children was wrong. Telling the truth about their loved ones feels like a betrayal. These feelings can sometimes translate into suicidality as the survivor struggles with the impression left by their abuser that if they talk about what happened, then they are dirty, nasty, or will be disowned. My fist is clenched. I was relaxed when I started. I'm just... Perpetrators groom their victims by giving the impression that they love them and make statements relating to their victim that they will never be loved the way the perpetrator loves them. And so some survivors feel guilt in leaving their abuser. Other survivors feel inadequate to manage life without their perpetrators in the picture, following up on messages from the abuser that they cannot live without them. An interruption in the survivor's system of meanings. A person's system of meanings involves their assessment of who they are based on the person's abilities, weaknesses, feelings, and life. Childhood abuse interrupts a survivor's sense of self, which leads to a struggle to maintain faith or belief that justice, ethics, and morality are unreal. This leaves the survivor with an unfairly contorted outlook on the world. This distorted vision of their environment often leads to doubt that there is any goodness or kindness that isn't selfish, and that they can never find forgiveness, although they did nothing wrong. Victims of CPTSD may also have physical symptoms such as eating disorders, substance abuse, alcoholism, promiscuity, chronic pain, cardiovascular problems, gastrointestinal problems, migraines, and autoimmune disorders. Survivors are individuals first and have different life experiences. It is also vital to note that comparing one person's experiences with childhood or other trauma with someone else's is like comparing an apple to an orange. While they are both almost round and contain seeds, that is where the resemblance ends. One person's trauma is not better or worse than that of someone else. People who suffer from CPTSD may go for years before making the connection between their symptoms and the chronic stress and trauma they have been trying to cope with. Once they do, healing can begin. Complex PTSD can be debilitating. Those who suffer from CPTSD may be at greater risk of substance abuse or of deliberate self-harm in order to cope with their emotional pain. None of this means that I'm irredeemably broken or that I have a horrible personality. It means that I have had some less than ideal experiences during a crucial phase in my development, which influences how I view the world and react to some situations. None of this is my fault, and it doesn't make me a bad person. It just is. My needs weren't met, and so I didn't develop many of the necessary skills to cope efficiently as an adult. Maybe I'll never be what I consider to be normal, but that doesn't mean I shouldn't try to live as healthy a life as possible in spite of my past. Now, obviously, I took sources from some places on the internet, a few different places to construct what I just read to you. But it is my diagnosis. People with CPTSD often don't talk about their life experiences until they reach adulthood. My first time ever talking about it, I was in my 30s. I told the very first person I ever told was my best friend. And 2 weeks later, she committed suicide. And then I didn't speak about it again for more than a year. That was when I had my major mental breakdown, which I've spoke about in previous videos. So it's something that, I will probably spend my life recovering from. I've spent more than 30 years suffering from, and I'm going to have to spend my life recovering from. It takes work. Every day, hard work. A lot of it. And continuous work. And I am doing it. I am doing the work. A lot of things were put on hold because of everything that changed with the world. And it really wasn't a good time for those of us who are already suffering, because we're already suffering. And then with everything happening in the world, anxieties and emotions were even higher, and all of our resources, the majority of our resources, were no longer available. So that just makes it more difficult. It's not that it's impossible. It's just that it's more difficult. Do I have a personality disorder? Yeah, in some senses I do. CPTSD is considered a borderline personality disorder, I guess. But I'm not crazy, and I don't have multiple personality disorders or anything like that. So I don't have dissociative identity. I don't have DID. To the point of, no, I don't even know how to word this, because I do dissociate. It is a disorder, but it's not the same as the DID that is multiple personality disorders. So I don't, lose who I am. I'm always Angey. I'm never somebody else. I don't have other people living in my head. It's so complex. And that's why there's that word in front of it, complex post-traumatic stress disorder. It's very complex. The healing to it is very complex and very out there, I've spoken about in my Therapy and Me video, I spoke about through EMDR having the characters instilled, one of them being my protector Frankie, but I also have a caregiver, a mother figure, and I also have an animal as well. So, that is something that is well known in EMDR, even though a psychologist tried to come on and say that it wasn't real. I have spoken with that full conversation with my therapist. I showed her the full conversation, and she is under the agreement that that person isn't legitimately a psychologist, and if they are, they need to get off YouTube, because that's not okay for psychologists to be doing. So anyways, this is basically just a little bit of a explanation on my crazy. So thanks for watching. Thanks for supporting me. Thanks for sticking by me through my insanity, if that's what you want to call it. And we'll catch you in the next one. Bye for now.